Buenas
Well,
noches con todos.
good evening.
Nuevamente saludarles a quienes
I wanted
se
to say hello
conectaron en
again
este momento para el foro
as
y
we've
bueno,
now
a
joined
quienes
up
nos
again for
acompañaron
the
desde el
forum.
inicio de la película, seguramente
And I want to welcome again those that have
tenemos
stayed with us since
como
the
les
beginning
había
of
dicho,
the
muchas
screening.
emociones
There's been a lot of
encontradas, ¿no? Un mensaje de
emotions
mucha
that we've
esperanza al
found,
final, pero
and
también
it's a
de
message of a lot of
muchas
hope at the
dificultades que
end,
vienen
but
enfrentando
also
los
one
pueblos
of many
indígenas
difficulties
desde
that
el
the
norte
indigenous
hasta
communities
República
are
Dominicana.
facing in North and South
Ahora
America.
nosotros
And currently,
en este panel de discusión
in this
vamos
panel
a
discussion,
el panel se llama
this panel is
otra
called
tragedia en la Amazonía.
Another
Hace
Tragedy in the
referencia
Amazon,
a un
and it
derrame
refers
petrolero que
to
ocurrió en el
an oil
mes
spin that
de
happened
junio.
in the month of June.
Y
And
como panelistas para
as
panel
panelists
tenemos a
for this panel,
Lina María Espinosa,
we have Lina
encargada
Maria
de la
Espinosa. She's a
organización
lawyer
Frontlines.
from Amazon
Luego
Frontlines.
intervendrá Verónica Grefa, que es
And also
presidenta de una de las
Veronica
comunidades
Grefa,
afectadas,
president
la
of one
comunidad
of the
Toyuca.
affected communities, the
Luego
Toyuca
intervendrá el
community.
compañero Carlos Hipa,
And
él es
also
presidente
Carlos
de una de
Hipa
las
is
federaciones
president
quichuas
of one of the
que
Quichua
abarcan más de
federations
150 comunidades,
that
cuyas
is
comunidades están
home to
principalmente
more than 150
en
communities
en el río
that
Napo, que es
find
uno de los ríos que
themselves
fue impactado
principally in
por
the
este derrame.
Mapu
Y
River, which was
finalmente
the river
tendríamos a la
majorly affected by this
intervención
oil
de
spin.
Patricia Gualinga, que
And we
como
also
ustedes
have
vieron
the
fue
participation
una
of
de
Patricia
nuestras,
Gualinga. As you've seen, she is one of the
protagonistas, digamos,
protagonists,
del
we
filme
could
Condor
say,
y El
of
Águila.
the film
Antes
The Condor and the
empezar, no
Eagle.
sé, bueno, vamos
Well,
a dar inicio
then we can begin
con nuestros panelistas.
with our
Yo
panelists.
preferiría que cada uno se
I would
pueda
prefer
presentar,
if
contarnos
each
un poco
person
sobre
could introduce
quién es,
themselves and
qué
tell us a
hace
little
y
bit
luego
about who
su
they are, what they
intervención.
do, and
Entonces yo
also,
nada más quiero darle la palabra en
a
este
little about their
momento a
work.
Lina María
So I want to
Espinosa
pass the mic
y
to Lina
escuchamos.
Maria Espinosa, and let's listen.
Buenas noches
Good
a
evening
todas, todos,
to
todes
everyone
quienes nos escuchan. Buenas
who
noches
is listening.
a las y
Good
los
evening
panelistas
to all the
que comparten
panelists
esta noche
that are
este
sharing tonight
conversatorio. Mi nombre es
in this
María Espinosa,
conversation.
soy
My name is
defensora de
Maria
derechos
Espinosa.
humanos
I'm
y
a
abogada
human rights
de la
defender
organización
and
Amazon
a
Frontlines.
lawyer in
Y
the
en este
organization
caso, de
Amazon
manera
Frontlines.
particular, miembro
And
de la Alianza
currently,
por
I'm a
los
member of
Derechos
the
Humanos en
Alliance
Ecuador
for Human
y
Rights in Ecuador
abogada de las
and a
víctimas
lawyer
del derrame
for
que mi
the
compañero
victims of the oil
Carlos
spill
ha
that
mencionado.
my friend Carlos just mentioned.
Y justamente me quiero referir
And
a esos
I wanted
hechos
to speak
para
exactly
que
about
se pueda
these
tener una
events
comprensión general
so that you can
no
have a
solo de lo
general
que ha ocurrido,
comprehension not
sino
only
de cómo ese
of what has
derrame ha
happened, but
impactado
also about how
de
this oil spill
manera
has
importante
impacted
la vida de al
in a
menos
really
27,000
powerful way
personas
the lives
indígenas
of
quichuas
at least
que
7,000
viven a lo
indigenous
largo
Quechua
de los
people that
ríos
live
Colca y
along
Napo
the
en la
Colca
Amazonía
and
ecuatoriana.
Napo rivers in
Y
the
que nos
Ecuadorian
acompañan
Amazon.
también en este panel
And
y luego entiendo darán un
I know that they're
directo
here
sobre
on
lo
this
que ha
panel as well,
ocurrido,
and they can
sobre
give a
cómo
direct
esto les ha
testimony
impactado.
about what has happened and how it has
Contarles
impacted
que
them.
la zona
I
donde
wanted to
ocurre
tell
este
y'all
derrame
that the
es
zone
una
where
zona
this
donde el Estado ha
oil
desarrollado
spill
varios
happened
proyectos
is
de
a place where
infraestructura,
many
entiéndase
infrastructure
una
projects have
hidroeléctrica
started
y
development,
el
a hydroelectric
trazado
project,
de dos oleoductos que transportan
and
crudo y
there are
un
2
ducto
crude
que
oil
transporta
pipelines and 1
gasolina,
duct that
combustible.
transports combustible gas.
Todas estas construcciones
All of these
realizadas de manera
constructions have been
inconsulta con los
realized
pueblos indígenas y todas
in a
ellas
manner
en una zona con una
that's
gran
not consistent with the indigenous
geomorfológica,
communities and
porque
has
está a las
a
faldas
large amount
de
of
un
geomorphic complexity.
volcán y porque adicionalmente
It's
la
on
zona presenta varias
near a
inestabilidades
volcano,
por temas de deslaves, etc.
and there's many complications that occur. It's created
tanto por estudios propios como por
a lot
advertencias que le han realizado
of
científicos y
danger.
sobre lo cual no toman
Scientific
ninguna medida en cuenta.
investigations have
Y en ese
considered the
contexto es importante
dangers.
señalar que el día
It's a
2
really
de
important
febrero del presente
context
año, una de
to
las
point out.
cascadas más grandes
The
y más
2nd
importantes de
of
Ecuador
February,
colapsó.
of this year, there was a collapse of one of the largest waterfalls. And in this particular case, it's a phenomenon that has accelerated because of human activity. And we can say it's because of this infrastructure development. So this collapse of the waterfall thrust into public knowledge that all of this infrastructure having to do with these pipelines was creating great risk. So the government of Ecuador and these petroleum companies, they knew that this oil spill could have occurred at any moment. And they knew that these pipelines, these oil pipelines, at any moment, they could break, they could create an oil spill, and they did not act. So the 7th of April, because of this advanced erosion, there were 2 breakages. And the state, the companies had not taken any measures to prevent this. And so recently, the 8th of April, that these oil companies let us know that there had been an oil spill. And then it was the communities experiencing the petroleum flowing through the river had already begun reporting in social media that this has happened. And those that normally fish in the mornings had returned to their communities covered in oil. And only at that point did the companies start working on informing us that there was an oil spill. And they didn't inform the indigenous communities. They didn't emit this information in the languages of those communities, but only in urban areas. And they only directed this information to the mayor of a large city so that they could start getting water from a different river rather than continue consuming water from the Napo River. So since that moment, these communities, the president of the FECUNA, the Indigenous Federation, began demanding from the state that they make clear how many thousand barrels were spilled and to demand an immediate response from the companies, because this is all happening in a health emergency due to the pandemic, where communities are experiencing distancing from one another, and these communities depend on the river, and it's now polluted. The lack of a response from the government and the companies, the 29th of April, various communities and indigenous organizations and religious leaders presented a constitutional guarantee that they called protection action. And according to our internal rule, it's asking for immediate protection for vulnerable populations. And it was accompanied by other legal recourse that are supposed to function more rapidly, and it demands that communities at risk are protected. But this Protection Act has been suspended. So 2 months have passed where these victims of the spill have been looking for a response from ministries, from these oil companies, and have not received any response, have asked for protection and have not received a response. And the worst thing is that those that experienced this oil spill have seen it happen again. The 18th of June, so a few weeks ago, it broke again, the pipeline. And there was escaping gas over the environment, over the river. And the 22nd of June, again, between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m., communities started seeing crude oil again flowing in the river. And they could smell, they could see evidence of oil and combustible gas. What the company responded is that it wasn't because of a new spill, but rather crude oil that had been stuck in sediments and started to escape when the rain began falling. So, all of this to say, there are 27,000 indigenous people that don't have access to water because their only source of water is the river that is contaminated currently. And they do not have access to protein because they base their diet mainly in what they can fish. And that food source was contaminated. Also, their crops have been affected because of flooding of the river, and that many are suffering from symptoms of their skin because of their contact with oil contamination, and are also suffering from the effects of COVID and dengue. The state needs to respond. It's very urgent. And the absence of their response to these obligations on the part of the ministries of the judicial system, it's quite clear. And so I want to take advantage of my opportunity to ask everybody listening that they support actions that the communities are taking, and that they can draw attention to the Ecuadorian government so that they can take responsibility. And to close, I want to say those 27,000 people who are at risk, these people who are waiting for a state response or a judicial protection, they're waiting for this response to arrive, and they're urgently waiting. And each day that passes counts and makes these risk situations more difficult to reverse. And Patricia, when I said when the state of Ecuador has been sanctioned internationally because they had not responded adequately to communities asking for protections, I want to remind us of that. And so, once again, I want to give my solidarity to other communities that are victims of pipelines and their negligence. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Lina, por tu
Thank you, Lina, for your explanation that has so much force behind it, much indignation. And the lawsuit behind it that is an alliance for human rights. And it's a group that has come together to support these Quechua communities. There are more than 105 communities, Quechua communities, that have been affected. And as was said in court in front of the judge, many were there to help represent from church organizations, from community organizations. It's important that they take action, that there be justice soon. And they have not paid attention to this case. We will continue insisting until there is justice in these communities so that they don't have to continue living the effects And so in this moment, I'm going to pass the mic to Veronica Grefa. Veronica, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and if you can tell us your testimony?
Muy buenas noches, mi nombre es
Good
Verónica
evening. My
Grefa,
name
soy
is Veronica
presidenta de la
Grefa.
comunidad
I'm
Toyuca,
president
una de
of
las
the
comunidades
Toyuca
que se
community.
encuentra
It's one of the
a las riberas del
communities
río Coca,
that's
y
on
fue
the
afectada
bank of
lo
the
que es del
Coca
derrame
River, and I
petrolero.
was affected by this oil spill.
En todo caso, voy a presentarme también en mi idioma.
I'm going to also introduce
Ayututa
myself in my language.
Verónica Grefa, Toyuca, Ayuyactamanta, Presidenta Migane. En todo caso, voy a proseguir lo que es a contar mi testimonio.
I'm going to tell my testimony.
Soy presidenta de 62
I'm a president
familias,
of 62 families.
Una comunidad que se encuentra a las orillas del río Coca.
It's a community that's found on the shores of the Coca River.
Hablo por mi persona y por toda mi familia y por
And
toda mi
speaking
comunidad
at
y
least
por
for
mis
myself
hermanos
and my family and my community and my indigenous siblings that were affected,
El 7 de abril ocurrió lo que es
the
el
7th
derrame
of April, that was when the oil spill occurred. And many of our brothers and sisters, my family, my siblings, that finds itself marginalized and alone because of the COVID situation. We were in our area, in our habitat, where this oil spill occurred. And it has affected us so much because we depend on fishing. It's our main source of food. And they killed many of the fish in the river, and they destroyed the aquatic ecosystem. And we became aware on the 8th of April when many of us went to fish in the river, and many took their fishing tools. Many went to gather water to make their breakfast. Some went to the river to clean themselves. And that's when we became aware ourselves that the river was polluted. And many knew already that it was oil because they had suffered years ago another oil spill, but many didn't know. And they continued to use the river, get in the river, without knowing if anything would happen to them. They didn't understand the extent of the pollution. And even today, some people continue to consume the water and they continue to fish because there isn't another way to get food. And so they consumed these fish, and now many of us are very worried because, that we're worried that we will see health problems after a time. Some, let their kids in the river because they didn't have any information from any public institution or coming from the companies. They didn't have that information where they told our Quechua siblings or to me or any other presidents of communities. They did not tell us that the river is polluted with oil and that we can't go in it or that we can't drink the water or we shouldn't consume the fish that are contaminated. This occurred, and it also affected our agriculture, our fields, it didn't just cause damage to us in terms of the nature, but also to our spirits, spiritually, because this river means so much to us. We even give names to our communities having to do with the river. And combined with the pandemic, it has affected us so much. We are suffering lacerations of the skin, infections, kind of staining of the skin. And this has been happening long term. The companies have come to the communities to make us understand. They're giving us food or gallons of water. They come to deliver 4 gallons of water per week. And they give that to each family. But our families are often, I don't know, 7, 5 children. So the water that they bring to us, they said it was, for the emergency. But we said that it was not enough water. But they didn't take seriously this complaint of insufficient water. And it's about 2 cups a day per person, the water that they're giving us. The gallon of water, 6 liters, 24 liters per week, and that is not enough. When before we were able to drink as much water as we needed, we were able to bathe ourselves and use this river and even do recreational activities, but not anymore. And we're also very separated because of COVID. We don't have any support. We don't have any response from authorities. And when we presented this protection action in the courts, we started this process. They've left, halfway. And we have no response from anyone, really. We're very, very worried. And now we continue to feel sick. Thankfully, many of our siblings are using our ancestral remedies to help, because we find ourselves without any help from any institutions, with nothing.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Veronica, for your testimony, for the worry, the care that you show. It's very impactful what you've told us. If you've been there been here since the beginning of the screening, it's a lot of what we've seen over and over. The things that Clement has highlighted in his film as well. This situation, these kinds of situations, they're happening in different areas of the Amazon, and they're repeating themselves. It's really necessary. Clement is sharing in the chat that we remember that one of the goals of meeting together today is to learn to be solidarious, to be in solidarity with one another, and to invite y'all to accompany us, to help in this campaign. And any donation will go directly to the Amazon Emergency Action Fund. And all the resources that go there will go directly to communities so that they are able to provide for their direct necessities that Veronica shared a bit about. because their ways of life have been affected. Their access to water, their chakras, their areas that they cultivate agriculture that have also been affected by the oil spill, and they're the main source of food. And the river as well, aside from providing water, is also part of their protein source. So the situation is very complex for these communities. And the solidarity of those who are listening is very important to keep supporting this cause. Now, I wanted to give the mic to our next panelist, Carlos Hipa. And in the same kind of manner, could you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, your job, or what you do, and your message? We're listening.
Okay, muy buenas noches.
Good evening.
Con todos nuestros compañeros y gracias por esta oportunidad. Pues,
to all of our friends, thanks for this opportunity. It's a delight to be here sharing about these subjects, these things that have happened in our Quichuan nation. My name is Carlos Hipa. I'm president of the Federation of United Communities of Quichua people. We are in the province of part of Ecuador, and as an organization, we represent the territories, and there are thousands of acres of land that we represent. I represent 80 communities, and those that are affected, that are within my jurisdiction, are 42 communities that are large in this territory. As an organization, we have been awaiting and observing attentively these bad habits of these oil companies, because in this river, the Coca River, I am also from a community that was affected, San Pablo. And coming from there, also representing the Federation, this river, the Coca and Napo rivers, this is not the first oil spill that has occurred. We know that since I was growing up near this river, the last time I saw in 2009, in 2013, and now in 2020. And despite the fact that these transnational companies are here, nobody has bothered them, nobody has done anything. They've come here and done as they liked. And we say enough of this. Today, the new generation, we need these companies to respond and to answer for all the damage that they have done to the Coca River and also the Napo River. And so the 7th of April, practically the events have left many large communities have been greatly affected. It's so sad to see how an oil company that has arrived 50 years ago or more does not have a contingency plan. They maybe had a few points that they had named, but they never actually came to the communities, that were at risk through living on the shores of this river. These companies, they knew that this had occurred 3 times in the past, but they never came to socialize. So it's very worrisome that today this company, when we say enough, we are not going to take this oil spill anymore. We need them now to respond to the affected communities. And well, yeah, those are their responses. Not giving any attention to these affected communities. And all of our Quichua siblings in our territory, we've been staying at home because of the pandemic. We've been staying in our homes. We've been feeding ourselves from our river. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, cleaning ourselves, cleaning our clothing. But this oil spill came and it caused a complete disaster one after another. It's like another pandemic coming to affect us. Many of our siblings, migrated to the city in order to not contaminate themselves. And this same company is the one that does give us medical attention. But in some communities, they only give us, paracetamol or mild painkillers. But there are children in these communities that have bathed in the oil. Those that were fishing, seeing the dead fish in our communities, those animals, the wild animals that live on the shores of the river, dead. Even dogs began dying because they were feeding themselves with contaminated animals from the river. And it's not just this, that they don't give us the proper attention. Talking about food, feeding ourselves. When we get contaminated or experience pollution, they don't respond. We needed to put forth that action of protection so that they would begin helping us with food. But there were more than 15 days that passed where we were unable to eat, where we didn't have the right to receive food, as they were polluting. We weren't able to drink water with dignity. We weren't able to have a healthy daily consumption. All of this has been part of the beginning of putting pressure on this company to respond. And practically, this has been occurring in various provinces. And one of them, Canton Aguarico, is one of the furthest that's in the province. And it's a shame to share that we have not received the support that we need. And we're making a call now to everyone that is part of this company, that they, have humanity and that they see that we are Ecuadorians. We are human beings of flesh and bone, that we feel pain. But
que
it's
ellos
not
digan fue un
possible
desastre natural.
that they just say this was a natural disaster.
Sé que fue un desastre natural, pero el
We know it
petróleo
was
no,
a natural
no
disaster, but
surgió naturalmente.
you know,
El,
oil
el
doesn't
petróleo
just
fue hecho por el hombre
spill
para
naturally.
transportar, y eso fue
It
lo que
was
nos
created by man, and they were
Entonces,
transporting it, and that is what
hago un
caused us
llamado
damage. So this is me making a
todos
call to
que
everyone
ver nuestra fuente de
who has
alimentación al no tener
seen
una de
our
las
lack
cosas,
of a source
el
of food.
alimento. Segundo,
One of the
no
things, the
contamos con
food,
medicamentos
we don't have medications that we need.
y peormente con atención médica.
And worst of
Y
all,
dentro de esto también está el tema de COVID-19,
even worse than that is the medical
nos ha
attention.
arrebatado
And all of
todos los
this in the
territorios
context of
de las comunas.
COVID-19,
Hoy por hoy
which has been affecting
vemos
all
cómo
of
el
our
Estado nos ha
territories.
dejado en total
territories.
abandono.
And we see that the state
No
totally
se ha
has abandoned us
responsabilizado de nuestros,
and has not taken any
Eh,
responsibility
como dentro de la Constitución establece, no nos da esa garantía
or
hacia las
or
naciones.
guaranteed anything promised by the
Entonces,
Constitution.
Ser un llamado de solidaridad con estos
So,
hermanos,
this is a
con
call
nosotros, los
for
quichuas que
solidarity
estamos a la orilla del
with
río
those
Coca,
siblings, us, the Quichua, on the shore of the Coca River, the 105 communities,
personas
the 27,000 people
que hoy por hoy padecemos
that
de
today
todo un poco de
are suffering from
enfermedades, pero más el
sicknesses
tema de COVID-19, porque
um,
ellos fueron quienes
like
nos
COVID-19.
obligaron a salir y contagiarnos.
And it was them
No
that,
fueron.
that made us
Nosotros siempre
have
hemos
to
estado
leave
conservándonos
and,
en nuestro
and get
territorio.
infected
Entonces,
because
decirles
we weren't able to survive in
hoy,
our own territories.
eh,
So
necesitamos esta ayuda
we need
humanitaria
help. We need
de
humanitarian help
personas
from
con corazón
people
que sepan solidarizarnos,
who have good hearts, who know how to
apoyarnos,
be in
brindarnos
solidarity, who are
una
able
vez
to
más, el
support
tema de
us, to
alimentación, el tema de
help
medicina,
us in these
y el
issues
tema
of food, of medicine.
prácticamente para todas estas comunas que se
And
encuentran afectados hoy por hoy. Y
this is
Estado
what we need in
ecuatoriano
all of
no
these
ha
affected
respondido
communities
a ninguno de
because the
nuestras
Ecuadorian state
demandas
has
que,
not responded to any of our
o
demands.
más que todo con las medidas cautelares que fue pedido. Y bueno, pues agradecer a
And
todos,
so I want to
muchas gracias
thank
por todo el
everybody
espacio brindado.
for the space today.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Gracias por,
Thank you, Carlos.
por
Thank you
señalar desde tu perspectiva
for
la situación
pointing
que están
us
viviendo las comunidades quichuas del
towards the
río
situation
Napo.
from your perspective
Algo que
about the
yo
indigenous
como
communities
latino
on the
comunitario
shores of the
desde
Napo
este
River.
derrame,
And this oil spill, I wanted to
oficial
share
inicial fue
the
que se
official
derramaron
number.
alrededor de 4.500 barriles.
It was 4,500 barrels that were spilled, was the official number. And in the National Assembly, they spoke of 18,000 barrels. So these number looks to us to be low, actually. And it looks like there's still oil that is flowing through the rivers. And it was so much between the Coca and Napo rivers. It's 300 kilometers between the site of the breakage and the Peruvian border, and there was news sites told us that though there were some communities on the Peruvian side that were also affected along the Coco River. The magnitude of this disaster, as Carlos mentioned, is starting to occur in a moment where communities need more than ever water to be able to take preventive measures against COVID. Many have been forced to leave to little cities, but then there's more danger of getting sick.
realizar nuevas pruebas en la zona para confirmar nuevos casos. De hecho, me parece que Carlos estuvo
and
enfermo
it looks to me like
con COVID.
Carlos was sick.
Pronto, pero esta es una de las grandes preocupaciones de
It's
que
one of the
todavía
greatest
no se
worries
puedan acceder a estas medidas,
that these
básicas
people
medidas
cannot
preventivas del acceso al agua, más
access
también para poder,
basic protective measures
prevenir
like having
esta
water
pandemia
to be
que
able to
está
prevent
avanzando
the spread
a
of
un ritmo
this
acelerado
pandemic that is
en la Amazonía
still
en
spreading
general,
at a
¿no?
high
Y
rate
que,
in the
como lo
Amazon.
mencionaba uno de los dirigentes de las
And as one of
comunidades,
the
un
directors
dirigente de la organización regional
of
amazónica del
the
Ecuador,
regional
decía,
Amazon
los pueblos
Ecuador
indígenas están viviendo una triple amenaza.
community is
Están
that
a merced de la
indigenous people are
pandemia,
living a
están
sort of
viviendo,
triple threat,
desastres
right?
naturales
The
también, como las
natural
inundaciones,
disasters,
y
the
ahora
pandemic,
también los derrames
um,
petroleros.
natural disasters like
Con
floods,
esto,
and
con
now
esta-
disasters caused
con esta
by
introducción
oil
un poco,
companies.
quisiera dar
And I
la
wanted to
palabra a
give
Patricia
the mic
Gualinga.
to Patricia
Creo
Walinga.
que Patricia nos va a dar
I
un
think
contexto
Patricia is going to
bastante
give
más
us a
amplio, ¿no?
little
sobre estos tres
more of a
aspectos
broad
que les he
context
mencionado, ¿no? Esta triple amenaza en la que están viviendo los
about
pueblos
those
indígenas,
three, that triple
y
threat that
que Sarayaku ha sido
indigenous
precisamente
communities are
víctima
living in.
de
Because
unas
she has
inundaciones
been
sin precedentes
a
en los
victim of
últimos-
a flood.
en muchísimo tiempo. Realmente no hay un historial de estas
And
inundaciones que se dieron en la zona. Y bueno,
there's been quite a
Pati,
few in the
dejo para-
area, but
el
Pati,
micrófono es tuyo.
I want to give you the mic
Buenas
now.
noches con todas
Good
y
evening
todos.
to
Gracias
everyone.
por la invitación.
Thank
a
you
este
for the
conversatorio.
invitation to
Mi
this
nombre es
conversation.
Patricia Gualinga.
My name is
Soy del
Patricia
pueblo
Gualinga.
originario
I'm
Quichua de
from
Sarayaku,
the
acá
First
en la
Nation
Amazonía,
Quichua
en la provincia de
Sarayaku
Texas.
in the Amazon.
La situación de los pueblos
The
indígenas es
situation
realmente compleja,
of
por no decir que es una
indigenous
situación
communities
crítica.
is very complex, but
No
it's
se
a
puede
critical
hablar
situation.
solamente
We
de
can't
un
just talk
desastre
about
o de
one
una
disaster or
Tenemos
one
que hablar,
crisis.
cuando hablamos
We
de
need
la
to
situación
speak
de
when we
pueblos
talk
indígenas,
about these
de múltiples
situations
crisis
of
que no han sido
many
provocadas
crises
necesariamente por aquellos pueblos que hemos estado
that
al
have
frente
not
de la
been
lucha para
created
proteger
by
los
these
territorios,
communities
para
that find
para
themselves
estar,
on the front lines of the
en
fight,
conservación
of the
con la
struggle,
naturaleza. Cuando hablo
of
de
conserving
todas estas
nature.
múltiples, emergencias,
When we
ya
talk
lo
about
mencionó
these
Carlitos,
multiple
uno es el
emergencies,
COVID,
as
los otros son
Carlitos
las
said,
graves
one is
inundaciones
COVID,
a consecuencias
one
del
is the
desequilibrio
big
climático, de la crisis
floods
climática.
that
Está
are
la enfermedad
happening
del dengue
at,
provocada igualmente por la crisis
caused
climática.
by
Antes no teníamos
climate
dengue en
change.
esta zona, ahora ya lo tenemos.
Before we did not
A
have
esto se
dengue in
suma
this region, now
todo
we
el
do.
interés extractivo que sigue ampliando
And this
la
is all
frontera
part of the
petrolera,
extractive
minera,
interests
hidroeléctrica,
that we
mientras
see,
nosotros estamos en cuarentena. No
hydroelectric
hay que olvidarse que
extractions,
los gobiernos han aprovechado toda
mining.
esta situación de crisis para
This
ampliar
crisis
y tratar de
situation,
generar leyes
they've tried to take advantage of it to create laws protecting the extractive industries that have done us so much damage. So we need to think way more broadly of consequences, of the consequences of COVID, of dengue, of the floods, the consequences of the ambition that they have to just create more exploitation. We have won judgments in front of judges. We've fought so that they respect our rights. We've even won in the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, international sentence that talks about the consent of indigenous communities. But the companies continue with the model that they've been using. But the world has entered a global crisis now that has produced that has been created by an incorrect way of being. It's the self-destruction of human beings. We've always said that we are nature. We are the energy of nature. If we're in disasters, it's because we have provoked these disasters. If we are so unbalanced, it's because we have provoked it. It is the responsibility of the human beings to take responsibility for the consequences we are living. We've suffered 5 floods since March. My people have lost many of our goods. We're in a crisis of food availability. And I've seen this in many provinces as well. We're living all of the consequences of human activity. And I'm not talking about the First Nations actions. I'm talking about the government of the large multinational companies, the actions of people who consume in excess, that provokes a total unbalance with nature. So we want to say that the indigenous peoples have always been on the front lines. If we're asking for donations, don't say, oh, we're donating to those poor little people who are dying of dengue. No, you're donating to the people who are fighting so that you and your family can live as well, that your children, that the next generations will continue to live in this world. You need to think of indigenous communities as part of the world struggle. We are defending ourselves and all of you. And you need to understand that very clearly, because it's very much easier to say, oh, we're going to donate to indigenous people because they need it and they're good people. No, you need to do it because they are suffering because of our responsibility, that we need them to be able to fight so that we all can survive. We need to change our vision. We need to be reborn. We need to reconnect ourselves with nature and with the earth. And we need to relearn about the indigenous wisdom. Our wisdom have always respected nature. If an indigenous community signed some contract with an oil company, it was because they were confused and they were led astray from the path. But we have the huge challenge as a society to relearn again from indigenous communities, to learn to feel again the living jungle, to connect ourselves, to think, and to realize that the destructions of the Amazon will destroy all of the biodiversity necessary for humanity, and the nature that maintains the balance of the planet. And there's so many movements to defend different areas of the world, but indigenous people are defending ourselves and defending nature in so many different areas. And the movie has shown that very clearly, that despite being separated by different cultures, from geography, different languages, but we have a connection in our energy and our spirit that helps us protect our world. I've never seen an animal that destroys itself so much besides human beings, the governments that don't want to listen. We're all in the same boat. It is our obligation, take our responsibility from each side, from each part of the world we're in. If you're in the US, if you're in Africa, do your part and we can achieve together. I want to thank y'all for this invitation, and I want to put forth a call that we all take up the fight from where we are, to relearn, to connect ourselves, and to be generous. Because it's also part of you. It's also your fight. It's not just the fight of indigenous peoples.
Muchísimas gracias, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I want to thank you so much, and Lina Maria, a very passionate lawyer that I've had the pleasure of sharing some months of work on various causes, and especially this one that we are talking about today, about what's happening, this tragedy in the Coco River that's affecting our Quechua communities. And it's a pleasure being able to share today with Veronica and Carlos. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your testimonies that have moved so many people, as we've been able to see in the chat. And we're calling it genocide, what's happening. And there was one testimony in the film that was someone in the north said that the companies were really implementing genocidal practices. And thank you for sharing with so much power, so much wisdom, for motivating solidarity with indigenous communities, with empathy and solidarity with this struggle, that this struggle be our struggle. And I'm left with the message that Sophie Guerra had seen in the summary of the film that had spoke a bit about colonialism, and I was left thinking a lot, what is colonialism? What they teach us in school, that seems like something that happened so long ago, you know, in our case when the Spanish arrived, but indigenous people are living it day to day, that mining companies, the Latino communities, minority communities, African descended communities, we're living daily colonialism. It's important to decolonize our heads, our hearts, and to think in a less selfish society, which was another one of the powerful messages in Clement's film. We are living in a very selfish system that wants to capture and destroy everything, that wants to limit liberty and freedom, that everything needs to be like a cement city, like the ones that you saw in the movie, that they were just trying to construct this in the north of the Amazon. There's a debt, a social debt to the earth, to the environment that's quite large. We still need to work together to turn it around, turn the system around. We need a system that is more just, that has its basis in rights. In Ecuador, we have a constitution that has quite advanced when it comes to rights, but unfortunately, they're not followed through. The rights of living well, of plurinationalism, of nature. But we are in this moment of demanding justice, and we see that they are not being followed through with. It's as if we're, playing these games. And sometimes it's the government itself that needs to defend its people, the health of its people, but they don't. But nonetheless, I want us to leave with the hopeful message at the end of the film that Clement and Sophie made, and with the power that Carlos, Veronica, and Patricia have shared, that this is a struggle that continues, that change is within all of us, those that are in any part of the world, and that we need to have solidarity in this fight with heart, and knowing that this is our fight. And I want to thank also Clement, Sophie, to Clement, Sophie, each and everyone who has been here since the beginning with us and has been in the forum. And I don't know if Clement wanted to add anything more, or maybe there are some questions that remain to be answered. Could you guide me a bit?
Clement. Bueno, entonces antes de cerrar y para
before closing,
muy democrático,
and to be
me
democratic,
gustaría saber si tal vez
I wanted to ask if Veronica, Lina,
les gustaría decir algo
Carlos,
más
if you'd want to
adicional
say anything more
cerrar el
additionally to close the space.
A mí me gustaría,
I would just like Carlos to thank you and to thank all the panelists and the work that Clement and Sophie have put forward with the documentary, and to thank everybody listening and insist on the importance of solidarity and insist on the importance of being able to count on you all with your voice, that the Ecuadorian government can hear that they are violating the rights of indigenous communities and leaving them without water, without food in the middle of a pandemic. And they cannot be putting the interests of companies above life. You need to let your voice be heard. You need to denounce it. There cannot be impunity, and we need many diverse voices. The indigenous communities fight and are demanding justice. And so I hope to count on your solidarity and your voice. Thank you. And if no one else wants to share, I'm going to close the forum. Special thanks to Catalina, who's helping us with translation. Thank you so much for all your work. Thank you, Clement, who's already in the early morning over there in Germany. I hope you rest. And thank you to everyone here. A virtual hug, and I hope to be able to see you all with more good news and with more good energy. I hope you're all well. Good night.